The world faces monumental challenges. It always has. But if you look around, progress is everywhere. People are coming together, imagining a better future, working to turn ideas into positive impact. Sometimes they stumble, other times they fail. But through each misstep, mishap, and mistake, there's progress, not only for the chosen few, but for everyone. Progress is making clean energy accessible. Progress makes landfill useful. Progress empowers Indigenous success, advances healthcare, protects the vulnerable, improves quality of life for dementia patients. Progress expands access to education. We've made incredible progress, but there is more to be achieved. Our sights remain forward. Progress for all.
Hello everyone, good afternoon and welcome to our guest lecture session today with the title Green Corridors, Shared Futures, Australia-Indonesia Collaboration in the Clean Energy Transition. My name is Sarah Molina, I'm a staff member at the Australia Awards in Indonesia and I will be your host for today. On behalf of Australia Awards in Indonesia, we extend a warm welcome to our scholars, Australian alumni, and representatives from the Australian Embassy and partners. We are so delighted to welcome any representative from the University of New South Wales if they are here. But before we start, please allow me to also share a few housekeeping rules to guide our session today. First, please format your Zoom name using the following template: name, organizations, and scholars, alumni, or partners. 2, mute your microphone throughout the events or unless asked by the MC or moderator. Kindly activate the caption in the below Zoom button for participants who need it. 3, to maximize the quality of your Zoom viewing experience, we encourage you to use a laptop or desktop. 4, if you would like to ask questions, for the Q&A sessions, please drop your question in the following link in oz.link/Q&A, or you can find it later, provided by our team in the chat box. 5, this event is recorded and will be distributed to all attendees via email. By the end of the session, we are going to have fun quizzes with exciting prize from us, so please stay and enjoy today's session until the end. So, what if the future of education is not only digitally advanced, but culturally grounded? The Indo-Pacific sits at the center of the global energy transition, accounting for roughly half of global energy use, hosting most of the world's population, and supplying many of the critical minerals needed for decarbonization. Consequently, the region's energy choices will not only shape global climate outcomes, but also redefine economic and strategic relationships. Although the rapid expansion of renewable energy presents opportunities to enhance energy security, clean energy supply chains remain highly concentrated, particularly with China dominating key sectors, underscoring the urgent need for diversification. Against this backdrop, this lecture examines how Australia and Indonesia can work together to drive a more resilient and diversified clean energy transition into the Indo-Pacific. Australia offers abundant renewable resources, advanced technologies, strong capital market, and enabling policy frameworks such as the Future Made in Australia Agenda and Southeast Asia Economic Strategy to 2040. Complementing this strength, Indonesia brings significant market scale, growing industrial demand, a strategic geographic position, and extensive reserves of critical minerals, especially nickel, supported by expanding processing capacity. Together, the two countries are well positioned to develop green trade corridors that link Australia's new renewable energy capabilities with Indonesia's industrial base, enabling the creation of certified low-carbon supply chains across sectors such as solar photovoltaic, battery electric vehicles and hydrogen electrolyzers. The lecture will highlight opportunities for collaborative projects, innovative financing mechanisms, and technology partnerships that can anchor regional supply chain, strengthen energy security, and position both nations as leaders in shaping a sustainable energy future in the Indo-Pacific. I'm delighted to introduce our distinguished speakers to today's lecture, Dr. Denny Gunawan, or we can call Pak Denny. Pak Denny is a research associate in the Particles and Catalysis Research Group within the School of Chemical Engineering at the University of New South Wales. He is also affiliated with the Australian Research Council, or ARC, Training Center for the Global Hydrogen Economy and the ARC Center of Excellence for Carbon Science and Innovation. His research focused on advancing photocatalytic solar fuels and chemical production through innovative material design and reactor engineering. By integrating catalytic innovation with system thinking, Dr. Gunawan's work contributes to the development of sustainable energy solutions aligned with global decarbonization goals. Beyond the laboratory, Dr. Gunawan has been actively involved in decarbonization projects led by government and industry stakeholders, where he conducts techno-economic analysis of sustainable fuel and chemical production technologies. Through this work, he bridged fundamental science and applied engineering, supporting Australia's transition toward a cleaner and more sustainable hydrogen and carbon economy. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite our speaker, Dr. Denny Gunawan. Pak Denny, the time is yours.
Yep, thank you, Sarah, for the kind introduction. And good afternoon, selamat siang, everyone. Thank you for coming, and it's my great honor and pleasure to actually fill this session today. So thank you so much for the Australia Awards Indonesia for the opportunity to give a guest lecture today, I guess, on one of the most important topic, I guess, energy, which is also a hot topic, especially in the current geopolitical and economic situation around the world. So let me share my screen and presentation. Wait, um, yep, should be okay. And then yep, hopefully everyone can see the slides now. So yeah, thank you for the kind introduction, Sarah. So as Sarah mentioned that my name is Denny Gunawan. I'm currently a lecturer in the School of Chemical Engineering at UNSW Sydney. So today I'll be talking about green corridors, shared future, Australia-Indonesia collaboration in the clean energy transition. But before I delve into the topic, I just wanted to give a little bit of background on myself and also the school where I'm based on, because in Indonesia we say that tak kenal maka tak sayang, right? So I'm originally from Surabaya, Indonesia, so I can speak bahasa actually. And I completed my bachelor's degree in chemical engineering back in Surabaya in 2017, and then continue my PhD in chemical engineering at UNSW Sydney in 2019. And then after finishing my PhD, then I moved to Australia, work as an academic at UNSW Sydney, the same university where I finished my PhD. Uh, yeah, let me bring up the pointer first. Good, okay. So a little bit about UNSW, right? So the main campus of UNSW Sydney is located in Kensington, Sydney, which is very convenient because it's close to every Sydney main attraction like Bondi Beach and then Sydney Opera House, Harbour Bridge. It's a very nice city to live. So for those that are interested, to continue study in UNSW, it's definitely one of good university in Australia, and we have a very strong engineering departments as well here at UNSW. And then the school where I'm based on at UNSW is the School of Chemical Engineering. So it's one of the school under the Faculty of Engineering, and we have a number of research area where we are expert, including like clean energy and then smart process system, food engineering, environmental technology, medicine, and even nanomaterials. And in the School of Chemical Engineering, we are the home of many prestigious research centers. So I would like to highlight two research centers where I am affiliated with, which is the ARC Center of Excellence for Carbon Science and Innovation, where we're looking at technologies to abate carbon dioxide emissions, and then ARC Industrial Transformation Training Center for the Global Hydrogen Economy as well. This is we're looking at producing hydrogen economically as well, but also looking at the social, environmental, and economic aspect as well of hydrogen production. Other than that, we have many different other research centers, including like in the space of environmental technology like membrane, and then photovoltaic solar panel recycling and sustainability, and even medicine as well. A little bit about the research that I'm doing within the school. So our research group is expert in solar to X, right? So what is solar to X? Maybe a little bit definition about solar to X is that we're trying to convert solar energy into X, and X can be any chemical and fuels, right? So the idea is that we know we have solar energy, we have abundant sunlight here in Australia, and in Indonesia as well. We have a lot of abundant sunlight. We know that sunlight can be converted to electricity, right? But there's also potential to actually use sunlight to convert waste around us or abundant molecules around us, like water or CO2 emission, into fuels and value-added chemical as well that we can use in our daily lives. Okay, so instead of sourcing these fuels and chemicals from fossil fuels, we wanted to source it from solar energy so that it's become more sustainable. So there are many different technologies that we're developing in the laboratory, right? So including like electrocatalysis, photocatalysis, photoelectrocatalysis, and photothermal catalysis. I will not go in depth about the chemistry because that's not the main objective of the talk. But I would like to highlight one of our flagship project. So we're not looking only in the laboratory, right? We're developing technology in the laboratory, but we want to move beyond laboratory. So because we're developing clean technology and we want it to operate under real conditions so that it's useful for the society. So this is one of our prototype or our technology that we're developing. It's called SHINE, stands for Solar Harvesting for Integrated New Energy, where we essentially want to harvest renewable solar energy to make chemicals, right? And one of the chemicals that we are targeting is methanol. The reason is because methanol is very important, right? For as an alternative fuels for road transport, for cars, or even for maritime fuels as well. So if you're interested and wanted to know a little bit more about Shine, the technology that we're developing, feel free to scan the QR code here. And in the next slide, I have a very short video about Shine. So feel free to have a look first before then we delve into the topic. Okay, I'll hopefully can play the video. Yep. Yeah, so that's pretty much about shine. The idea is essentially we want to use CO2 emissions, right? We capture CO2 emission because CO2 is a big problem in climate change, and then we want to convert that CO2 into something that we can use in our daily life, which is methanol, right? That we can use as alternative fuels. That's the idea about shine. Again, if you're interested to know more, we have a longer video where you can scan the QR code down here on the slides. So yeah, with that, I think next, oops, sorry. Yeah, I'll just go directly to the topic that we wanted to delve in, right? So it's about green trade corridors between Australia and Indonesia. So and you know that Australia and Indonesia sits within the Asia Pacific region, right? So to give a little bit of idea why the collaboration between Australia and Indonesia is critical within the region, then we need to understand Asia Pacific a little bit more. So this is a new data that I put in the slides from IMF, right? About the contribution of different countries on the economic growth globally. And you can see here, I wanted to highlight that Asia Pacific is expected to account for around 90% of the world economic growth this year in 2026, right? And this is one of the reasons is because Asia Pacific is huge, right? It's home to the 60% of the global population, and the region is currently a leader in global trade, manufacturing, and technology, including clean energy technologies, right? And if we see the breakdown here, we see that China, India, and United States are still the big player, right, in driving the economic growth. But Indonesia is also becoming an emerging market here, that becoming the fourth country with the most significant contribution to the global economic growth, right? So this is the reason why then the Indonesia can play an important role within the region. So mirroring from the economic growth, right? At the same time, Asia Pacific has huge CO2 emissions. So whenever we have economic growth, then we need energy, right? So because to drive economic growth, we need energy. And because we still mainly rely on coal, natural gas, and oil, right? CO2 emission from energy sector is still quite significant. And in fact, in Asia Pacific, the emissions responsible for around 50% of the global energy related CO2 emissions. And these again are driven by the growth in Asia Pacific across many different sectors, including industry, power, and transport sectors, right? So it's very important for Asia Pacific to decarbonize, right? Because it's the major contributor of the global CO2 emissions. So if we look at IEA report, right, how decarbonization looks like, or how the pathways to net zero emission look like. As you can see that there are many different sectors that we need to decarbonize. Okay, you can see that power generation and electric cars are very important, right, to reduce the emission, but they're not enough. They're alone not enough because half of the other emission coming from other sector like aviation, transport, industry, building, and other sectors. And among these sectors, especially industry, aviation, they are considered as hard to abate. So what does hard to abate mean? Hard to abate means that that sector is very difficult to just electrify, right? So for example, like aviation, we cannot just simply change our airplane into electric plane because of the limitation of the technology, right? So it's not so easy to electrify or replace with renewable electricity. And therefore, the solution for net zero emission are not just merely renewable electricity, but will also need other solution like hydrogen and also low carbon fuels. So looking back at the region, right, the Asia Pacific region, uh, In terms of clean technology development in the region and even the world, you can see that China is dominating, right? Across many different things, including the installed renewable energy capacity and then the production of many critical minerals that are important for manufacturing of battery, solar panel, electrolyzer, etc. They're still dominating. So this dominance of China in the clean energy sector creates significant vulnerability, especially if we see the current geopolitical situation, right, which is very volatile. And the current relationship sometimes between Australia and China is also not so good as well. So it's very important, I think, moving forwards that we need to maintain secure supply chains, right, for critical minerals, technology, resources, and industrial goods, especially for clean energy technology, because otherwise we will risk our energy transition to net zero emissions. And what's the solution then? The solution is we need to diversify, not just China, but we need to look into other countries that can source the critical minerals, that can source the renewable energy technologies, that have abundant renewable energy and hydrogen as well, right? So diversifying the regional supply chains within the Indo-Pacific region or Asia-Pacific region is very critical. We need to look at the alternative than China. So that's why Australia and Indonesia play a very important role in this case. Because it's very simple. The narrative is because Australia and Indonesia have shared ambitions and complementary roles. So I put 3 points here, although like there are many different points that we probably can list out about why we need to look at Australia, Indonesia as well. So first is because Australia and Indonesia has the same ambitions of first achieving the net zero emissions. Australia is committed to achieve net zero emissions by 2050, Indonesia by 2060. And then Australia and Indonesia both also active in promoting resource downstreaming. Okay. Second, because both Australia and Indonesia are resource intensive countries, so we both have abundant renewable resources, right? And they're complementary. For example, Australia has the world class at solar energy resources, and then Indonesia has abundant biomass. And then both countries have critical minerals. Like for example, Australia has a lot of lithium. Indonesia is developing its nickel industry. So it's complementary to support the clean energy transition. And then finally, Australia has advanced know-how, advanced technology, advanced research that then can support, right, the Indonesia industrial base and Indonesia large market size. And these are the key to actually scale clean technology, right? We need the technology, but this at the same time we also need the market, the end users. So looking at the government commitment, right, in Australia and Indonesia. So in Australia, the government has just recently released, right, the Future Made in Australia agenda, which essentially the government committed 22.7 billion to maximize the industrial and economic benefits of the net zero transition. And the objective of this agenda is the government wanted to transform Australia into renewable energy superpower and wanted to bring the domestic manufacturing of clean energy technologies onshore, right? So, and also to attract significant private sector investment to support this manufacturing development. So recently, the Australian government also give innovation fund as well on 3 priorities. So I wanted you all to highlight these 3 priorities because these then are the government priorities in the energy sector. First is green metals. All right, so the government really focus on developing green metal supply chain, including iron, steel, alumina, aluminum, as well as lithium and nickel for electric vehicles battery. Second priority is the renewable energy technology manufacturing. So we're not just stop at metal, but we wanted to go even to a higher value added product like technology, renewable energy technology, like battery, solar panel. and electrolyzer, for example. Okay. And finally, the government is also committed to low carbon liquid fuels, including sustainable aviation fuel and renewable diesel. Okay, so that's from the Australia side. So in the Indonesian side, we know that the current administration has Asta Cita, right? Asta Cita, which is what the government, the mission of the government, and one of the mission is to maintain downstream processing and develop natural resource industry to increase domestic value adds. And there are many different downstreaming projects that are going on. Although there are a lot of issue with the projects, we have to admit. Uh, but nevertheless, we have many different projects related to downstreaming and adding value to our natural resources, including nickel to stainless steel, as well as nickel to battery materials, battery precursor, and then iron to steel, copper and gold, asphalt, and palm oil, nutmeg, and coconut. So there are many different projects focusing on downstreaming. So we can see that there are overlap, right, between the ambition of Australian and Indonesian government. So we need to leverage this overlap to collaborate in advancing the clean energy transition. So based on the analysis, right, of the current government's ambitions, there are at least four building blocks of clean energy partnerships. First is critical minerals, as we can see, right? Because in clean energy transition, we will need a lot of minerals, including lithium, nickel, copper, cobalt, and rare earths. And then second is the energy resources as well, right? In the Asia Pacific, we have a huge trading, and we need to make sure that the cross-border trading must service the ongoing needs for energy resources, not only electricity, but also hydrogen energy. And then the third building block is technologies, uh, especially clean energy technologies in this case that I wanted to highlight. For example, solar panels, electrolyzers, batteries, and they're quite complex sometimes, the value chain. So therefore, it's very important to work within the region together. And then finally, industrial goods. Industrial goods that I'm talking about here, especially is green industrial goods, right? That are produced with renewable energy and hydrogen. For example, green iron or green steel. Okay, so for today's talk, I wanted to highlight on three key levers, right? On how we can leverage uh, collaboration between Australia and Indonesia. First, I wanted to talk about hydrogen and derivatives like ammonia or methanol. Third, I'm going to talk about low carbon liquid fuels that we can use in the existing infrastructure, such as making renewable gasoline, jet fuel, and diesel. Third level that I'm going to talk about is critical minerals, including lithium, nickel, and cobalt, particularly because they're very important for battery manufacturing. So let's start with hydrogen, right? Uh, Hydrogen is anticipated to play a role in the net zero transition. Okay, so this is from IEA report, and you can see that hydrogen has a role, but it's quite small compared to electrification, for example. Okay, the reason is because hydrogen will play a role in a very niche applications, especially to decarbonize hard to abate sector where direct electrification is not viable. Okay, so we need to identify what are the realistic roles of hydrogen. So if I may share, when I arrived in Australia in 2019, I think around 1 year or 2 years after that, uh, the government then is very hyped about hydrogen here, right? And there is a lot of plan going on about using hydrogen for fuel cell vehicles, right? For passenger vehicles. But then now, I think since around 2024, I think that plan has been abandoned, right? The reason is because it's very difficult for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles to actually compete with battery electric vehicles. Battery electric vehicles are far more efficient than hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. So we consider that the application in hydrogen for fuel cell vehicles are not viable, right? Although it can. So hydrogen can do that, but it's not viable. So as you can see here that there are many, it's called hydrogen ladder, by the way. So the higher it is means that the most likely the hydrogen can play a role, right? But the lower it is, then it's probably going to be very difficult to compete with electricity. So you can see that transport like ferry, light trucks, cars are very difficult to use hydrogen because battery will be more make sense. But there are sectors that hydrogen can play a role, say like fertilizer production, right? You need to produce ammonia from hydrogen. So it's inevitably that you're gonna need hydrogen here. And then shipping, jet aviation, chemical feedstock, they're all also like potential application for hydrogen. So again, I guess the government and we from industry as well, we need to look into the realistic roles of the hydrogen. Okay. And there are many different kind of hydrogen, right? Although hydrogen doesn't have color, but people attribute many different color or shades of hydrogen depending on how the hydrogen is being produced. So here I wanted to show five. First is gray hydrogen, or sometimes people call it black hydrogen, which essentially derived from natural gas or coal, right? Through a process called steam methane reforming or gasification. And this is the current method or type of hydrogen that we produce. And then we have blue hydrogen, which essentially the same with gray hydrogen, but we add carbon capture and storage. So the emission is lower. And then we also have turquoise hydrogen, also using natural gas, but using different process called methane pyrolysis. We also have pink hydrogen, derived from nuclear energy using electrolysis, and green hydrogen, using renewable electricity and electrolysis process. So green hydrogen is the most ideal in some of environmental aspect because it will offer the lowest carbon footprint, right? However, you can see that the cost is far more expensive than gray hydrogen. It can be 5 times or even more expensive. So it's currently not economically viable to produce green hydrogen. So a little bit of background on how green hydrogen is being produced, right? We use electrolyzer. Okay, so electrolyzer essentially is a device or a technology where it can use electricity to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. And then we can use the hydrogen for any purpose that we want. Okay, I will not go into the chemistry in this case, but there are two main common commercial electrolyzer: alkaline electrolyzer and PEM electrolyzer. And there are many different industries that are developing or manufacturing these electrolyzers. Okay, and they have their own advantages and disadvantages, which I will not discuss in detail as well in this case, but it's good to know for all of you that we need electrolyzer technology to produce hydrogen. Okay, so why green hydrogen is expensive, right? What are the key cost drivers that driving the high production cost of hydrogen? So there are many different analyses out there saying that it's expensive because of the electricity cost and also the electrolyzer cost. So it's very important for us if we wanted to develop hydrogen production value chain, they need to look into cheap source of electricity, and solar energy is one of that. You can see that solar energy has become one of the cheapest renewable electricity in the world. Okay. But at the same time, the electrolyzer cost is also important because currently they're quite expensive, either alkaline or PEM. We need to lower it by 3 times or even more than that in order to make sure that green hydrogen can compete with hydrogen from fossil fuels. Good. Okay, that's a little bit about the technology, the type of hydrogen. Now let's look a little bit on the policy aspect, right? In Australia, hydrogen has become a hot topic since 2019, as I say, right? When I arrived in Australia. And the government released the Australian National Hydrogen Strategy. And then 2 years later, CSIRO, which is essentially the research agency in Australia, released National Hydrogen Roadmap. And then more recently, the Australian government has released the National Hydrogen Strategy in 2024, right? Which is the refresh version from this one. Okay. because I think the government has started to look into more realistic roles of hydrogen in the latest version of the National Hydrogen Strategy. So I wanted to put a few highlights on what's in the National Hydrogen Strategy in Australia. So first, the government has clearly set target of the production, right, in 2030 and 2050. Okay, and the Australian government also has ambition for export. Okay, exporting the renewable energy. And in some of the economic, the ambition is to achieve $2 per kilogram of hydrogen cost to compete with the fossil fuels. So what's the key insight from this refreshed hydrogen strategy? I think it's very important for the government to set clear targets, right? Because then this will translate to certainty for industry so that it can reach to a final investment decision. Okay, and this is something that Indonesia needs to also adapt as well from Australia. And another insights that we can get from the Australian hydrogen strategy, with the current strategy, the government put focus on hard to abate sectors, okay, uh, in order to build and scale, okay, the hydrogen industry. And then another aspect is that the government provide incentive as well to support the development of hydrogen industry, including the hydrogen production tax incentive and also hydrogen head start. And all of this have supported many projects in Australia, right? And one of the project I think that is quite promising here in Australia is the Murchison project in Western Australia with a capacity of 1.5 gigawatt that is expected to start production in 2030. Okay, similarly, I think in Indonesia, the government is also quite active in hydrogen field, right? Especially since the government, the Ministry of Energy has released the hydrogen and ammonia roadmap. So peta jalan hidrogen dan amonia nasional, where essentially the government has divided the hydrogen deployment into three phases: initiation, scaling, and acceleration, right? And one of the key focus for Indonesia is not just stop at hydrogen, but to green ammonia. The reason is because Indonesia has a very huge fertilizer industry, so ammonia is very important. In fact, I think PLN and Pupuk Indonesia and Pertamina has already been very active in developing green hydrogen production. So this is a good signal of the hydrogen development in Indonesia. Okay, and the good thing also, the government has already set target as well of the hydrogen production at different phases here in phase one, phase two, and phase three. Okay, so in terms of hydrogen, I would like to highlight with this slide that with the current condition, the current geopolitical condition, and also the economic condition, I think hydrogen has shifted. The paradigm about hydrogen has shifted a little bit from environmental goal back in 2019, where people say that hydrogen to combat climate change, blah blah blah. But now I think with the current geopolitical condition, the many countries are really focused on ensuring energy security and energy sovereignty, right? So hydrogen is now just not just environmental goal, but becoming national strategic asset. Okay. So first, the role of clean hydrogen has shifted not just climate target, but also a strong pillar to support economic growth, economic industrialization, and also to ensure energy sovereignty. Okay, especially with the current supply chains of global oil, the increasing price of global oil. So it's very important to ensure energy security, especially domestic energy security. And hydrogen plays a role in ensuring energy security. And then second paradigm is that global policy now, including in Australia and Indonesia, reflects that hydrogen is not just green, right? It's not just about climate, but also about gold for the economy and armor for the fuel security. So with that, I think it's very promising aspect that Australia and Indonesia can work together on the hydrogen space, where Australia can source, economic economically feasible hydrogen technology, so that it can also be used in Indonesia, where it has a very strong industrial base, especially, for example, for fertilizer production, because Indonesia one of the largest fertilizer production in the world. Okay, so that's one potential in hydrogen. The next key level that I wanted to highlight is low carbon liquid fuels, as I mentioned. So this is the second key level. So it's related to hydrogen actually, right? Because low carbon liquid fuels are often considered as the derivatives of hydrogen. Because to produce low carbon liquid fuels, you need hydrogen. So what are low carbon liquid fuels, right? So low carbon liquid fuels essentially liquid fuels that we use in our daily life. For example, we use gasoline for our car. We use after or jet fuel for aviation, and then we use diesel, right? For diesel engine in our daily life. So how we can synthesize or making uh, gasoline, jet fuel, and diesel with renewable energy instead of fossil fuels. So these are defined as low carbon liquid fuels. And as you can see here, that I wanted to highlight the demand of low carbon liquid fuels is expected to triple over the next 20 years, right? And reaching approximately 600 million metric tons by 2050. Okay, so it's very important. You can see that it's the demand is mainly from road transport, aviation, maritime, and other sectors. Okay, so gasoline, jet fuel, and diesel are critical. Specifically for today, I wanted to highlight about aviation sector. The reason is because aviation is considered as the very difficult to abate sector. Okay, although the emission is actually only 3% in 2019, but the estimate suggests that aviation sector can contribute up to 22% of global emission, as you can see here. And as I mentioned, it's one of the most challenging sectors to decarbonize. And to decarbonize aviation, sustainable aviation fuel is the most viable solution, because you cannot simply just replace our aircraft now with electric airplane. You can imagine how big the battery requires if you wanted to fly, for example, from Jakarta to Sydney, for example, because it's a long haul aviation. So it's impractical at the moment. Okay. So the most immediate solution would be to change the jet fuels that we use today into something that is more sustainable. And it's called sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF. So there are many different SAF production pathways, but the most known pathways are these four. First is HEFA, hydrotreated esters and fatty acids, which essentially use oil feedstock. So Indonesia is very advanced in this technology. Pertamina has already worked a lot in developing the technology, especially using palm oil and used cooking oil. Okay, and in fact, HEFA process is the most mature technology to produce SAF. Okay, but the challenge with HEFA is about the feedstock, right? Because used cooking oil and then palm oil, um, we need to make sure that they are sustainably sourced and they are enough in terms of the quantity. So, although it's very mature pathway, we need to look into other pathway as well, because the scale of the feedstock that is available may not be enough. Alcohol to jet is another pathway, together with drops, where we can use more complex feedstock like agricultural waste, municipal solid waste, and even from sugarcane industry as well, because they produce waste such as bagasse. And then the other pathway is power to liquid, which essentially you only need carbon dioxide, renewable electricity, and water to produce sustainable aviation fuel. However, although power to liquid is one of the most ideal pathway, however, the technology is still under early development because it's not mature yet, right? And the production is still expensive. It can be 10 times more expensive compared to the current aviation fuel cost. Okay, good. And talking about feedstock, as I mentioned before, we need to make sure two things about feedstock for sustainable aviation fuel. First is that the feedstock is sustainable, right? That it's sourced sustainably. And then second, we need to make sure that the feedstock is enough to meet the demand. So this is the major challenge of SAF. It's actually not the technology, but the feedstock. And with Indonesia having abundant biomass potential combined with Australia, there are a lot of potential for bilateral self-production supply chain. Okay, another challenge of SAF is about the cost, right? They are still considerably higher than the uh, fossil jet fuel cost, right? As you can see here, the fossil jet fuel cost is within this region. But with the technology, I think HEFA is the closest one, okay? But with the other emerging technology like alcohol to jet, Fischer Tropsch, power to liquid, they are still far more expensive than the current cost. Okay, and therefore economy of scale and developing the technology through research and development is very important to bring down the cost. As you can see here, that in 2050 it's expected that many different technology would be able to produce SAF economically. Okay, although it's contingent to the research and development support, of course. Okay, now a little bit context of the Australia and Indonesia landscape on sustainable aviation fuel. So in Indonesia and in Australia, there has been a lot of activity around SAF, right? So I listed here many different activity in Indonesia and Australia, but they have similarity. That Indonesia and Australia has significant sustainable feedstock potential for SAF production, right? And both countries have large aviation market. In Indonesia, we are one of the largest domestic aviation market in the world. Okay, and in Australia, international aviation is key because, as you know from the global map, that Australia is far away from anywhere. So aviation is the key transport for Australia. So there's a lot of demand for after or aviation fuel in Australia. Um, and then another aspect in Indonesia, the good news is that the Indonesian government has made a SAF roadmap and has planned to actually implement SAF blending mandate as well for airlines in operating in Indonesia. And then our oil and gas company in Indonesia, Pertamina, has already started to produce SAF called BioAftur G2.4, right? And in Australia, there's also a plan to start production. For example, in Queensland, they're planning to use the ethanol to jet pathway to produce sustainable aviation fuel. And the good news as well, there's already collaboration between Australia and Indonesia in the SAF space. Okay, so Pertamina has supplied sustainable aviation fuel to Virgin Australia flights from Ngurah International Airport in Bali. Okay, I think that was for event which is Bali International Air Show back I think years ago. Okay, so this kind of anchor project is very important, and we need to, I guess, mimic this kind of project, collaboration project or supply chain project between Australia and Indonesia. Good. And next, talking about the production potential of Australia, as I mentioned, right? So a lot of biomass potential across Australia, right? Not just in New South Wales, in Sydney, but also in Queensland, Western Australia. And in some of the feedstock, I think, uh, this is the prediction from CSIRO, I guess, that showing Australia will need all pathways, all technology pathways. We cannot just rely on one pathway, like for example, HEFA and using oil feedstock. The reason is because the scale is just not enough. So we need to use many different technological pathways there, including even the power to liquid pathway, in order to fill the demand in the future by 2050. Okay. And this is just a summary on what's happening in Australia. I will not go into detail, but I guess the reason one is that again the Australian government has committed to invest to expand the low carbon liquid fuels, including sustainable aviation fuel. And then another one that I wanted to highlight, that in Australia, we develop technology a lot around SAF. One of the company that is quite advanced, and I have met the company and actually planning to collaborate with some Indonesian stakeholder, is Lysela, which is developing technology to convert wet biomass waste into sustainable aviation fuel using hydrothermal liquefaction technology. Okay, so there's a lot of opportunity, I guess, where the Australian technology can then be implemented as well in Indonesia, given the market is quite large. Okay, similarly, I think in Indonesia, the government has modeled the feedstock, okay, to meet the SAF demand. So as you know that in Indonesia, we rely a lot on used cooking oil and then palm oil as well to meet the to produce the biofuels, right? However, the government has modeled, and despite the large production potential, Indonesia, in fact, cannot rely solely on HEFA technology, right, on oil feedstock. So same with Australia, Indonesia will need to look into various SAF production pathways, including alcohol to jet, Fischer tropes, and power to liquid. This is a little bit of history, I guess, or timeline about Indonesia's SAF industry development that has already started in 210, and with the I guess activity that Garuda Indonesia and Pertamina has been doing on producing SAF, okay, called Bioafter G 2.4, and even the testing, the flight testing using SAF as well, that shows that it's possible to use sustainable aviation fuel, and the collaboration of Pertamina with Virgin Australia, and even with aircraft manufacturing company like Airbus for SAF industry development. But it's interesting to see, right? Because Indonesia's SAF journey actually started in university. You can see the technology that we're developing in Indonesia right now to produce biofuel started in ITB, actually, Institute Teknologi Bandung, where they developed catalyst merah putih, right? And you can see the progression from laboratory research all the way through the industrial deployment here by Pertamina, and then flight testing by Garuda Indonesia. So it's amazing to see how the technology actually translates from laboratory to industry and real application. So I guess that's something that Australia and Indonesia can work together as well on skills development, research and development as well for self-production technology. Yeah, and as I mentioned before, the Indonesia government has set target on blending mandate for SAF, starting from 1% in 2027, increases to 20% and 50% by 2060. Okay. This just a few highlights, I guess, on common barriers for Australia-Indonesia SAF industry. Okay. So to realize this SAF industry, bilateral SAF industry, I think one of the key barrier is the high production cost, right? Because currently, I think SAF is still 2 to 10 times more expensive. And then second is about the availability of feedstock. And third one is about the lack of SAF policy, regulation, certification, and incentives. Especially around certification, right? Because when we talk about green trade, we trading SAF between Australia and Indonesia, then how green you can claim the sustainable fuel is, it's depends, right, on the definition of green. What's the emissions that you can call green, right? So we need to have a common understanding, I guess, or certification when we can say that this fuel is sustainable, because it's relative, right? So there is no such thing as the certification yet, especially across different country. So I guess this is something that we can work together as well. It's not just Australia and Indonesia, but the broader Asia Pacific region. I think we need to have common understanding, especially noting that sustainable aviation fuel is a cross-border problem, right? A cross-border supply chain. Okay. And these are a few opportunities for partnership in the SAF application, I guess. First is joint research and development. on next generation SAF feedstock and technology. Second is about SAF procurement mechanism. How the mechanism, for example, if Garuda Indonesia is flying to Australia and then want to procure the SAF, and vice versa, what happens if Qantas and Virgin Australia flying to Indonesia and wanted to procure SAF from Indonesia, right? So we need to have common understanding and policy around this area. And then certification standard, as I mentioned, we need harmonization in the regional or even global scale. Good. Okay. So SAF or low carbon fuels is the second key lever to for clean energy partnership. And I wanted to end with the third key lever, right? Which is very important and recently becoming very hot, right? Is critical minerals, right? So critical minerals are very important for clean technology. Okay. The reason is because the shift to clean energy systems will drive a huge increase in the requirements of critical minerals. Okay, so you can see that we now rely a lot on coal, natural gas, right, and oil as well, which essentially fossil fuels. But moving forward, if we transition towards renewable energy, we're gonna rely more and more on critical minerals. Okay, for example, like copper, lithium, nickel, manganese, copper, etc. Okay, and in fact, okay, you can see the electric car compared to conventional engine car that we use in our daily life today. Electric car consume or needs more critical minerals than conventional car. Okay, it's all more than 4 times requirements of critical minerals compared to conventional car. So it needs a lot. Okay, and as well as other renewable energy technology, including solar PV and then wind turbine and nuclear. Okay, yeah. Another thing is about the geopolitical risk on critical minerals. Again, as I highlighted before, right, that China is dominating the supply chain, okay, including the extraction and process, especially the processing. You can see here, right? So many of the processing of critical minerals are in China right now, okay, and this create vulnerabilities for our region energy transition. Again, the key is then diversifying the supply chain, okay, so that we can secure the clean technology manufacturing and we can make sure that we can reach the energy transition. Good. Okay, so what is the opportunity for Australia and Indonesia, right? So, in order to identify the opportunity, I did a little bit of mapping of the critical minerals potential in Australia, Indonesia. Okay, especially around EV battery ecosystem. Okay, so one of battery chemistry, I guess, for electric vehicle is nickel battery, right? People call it nickel lithium NMC battery. So the critical elements that are needed for EV battery manufacturing include lithium, nickel, manganese, and copper. So how the distributions, I guess, of this mineral across Australia and Indonesia. You can see here, right? So this is the distribution of reserve. Again, reserve, not the production, right? But the potential that are available in Australia and Indonesia. Lithium. Australia actually one of the largest country that has lithium reserve. Okay. And then nickel, Indonesia is dominating right now, like has a lot of nickel reserve, as we know. Okay, and then manganese in Australia, they have a lot. We have a lot as well, and cobalt. There are cobalt in Australia, Indonesia. So theoretically, it's also possible for Australia and Indonesia to work together to make the regional EV battery ecosystem because we have all the ingredients that we need. Okay. However, we need to note that this is the reserve, right? We probably still don't have lots of processing capacity on certain minerals like for example cobalt. uh, so that's something that we need to work on if we wanted to realize this opportunity, but there is potential. And in fact, I think recently the government, the Indonesian government and the Australian government, under the Jokowi administration, has planned collaboration between the two countries to build the EV battery ecosystem, especially around the northern region of Australia that has a lot of lithium. So there is potential to actually work together with the Morowali in Sulawesi to build the EV battery industry there. However, there are many different key challenges, I guess, to realize this ecosystem or supply chain. First is that the nickel industry in Indonesia is quite problematic right now, as we know, right? They are high emissions, okay, because they are still rely a lot on coal use, and in fact, they use captive power plant a lot in their mining and processing. So this raised the carbonization challenges. And then second, there are a lot of environmental, social, and governance compliance concerns as well in Indonesian nickel industry, especially related to the environmental impacts, labor practices, and the regulatory enforcement. And finally, this is another important challenge as well because there is increasing competition with alternative battery chemistry. For example, I think it's also possible to actually use alternative battery other than nickel based battery. So it's called lithium iron phosphate or LFP battery that it's also possible to use, although they have their own disadvantage compared to the nickel battery. However, it's very important to note that this will then reduce reliance on the nickel intensive battery technologies. Okay, so this is another key challenge that uh, we might face in realizing the nickel based battery manufacturing in Australia and Indonesia. Okay, I wanted to highlight especially about the first challenge, right, on the high emissions of nickel industry in Indonesia. It's very important to decarbonize critical mineral industry. So this I cited from a paper where they essentially survey company, okay, on what sort of like measures that they're doing to decarbonize their production around the world. Okay, you can see that on-site solar and wind are dominating, right, in lithium, nickel, and copper industry. So electrification is definitely key, right? And solar and wind has become cheaper and cheaper as well. So this is one potential renewable electrification. But other than that, I wanted to highlight about the potential for energy efficiency, right? Improving energy efficiency by changing to a more energy efficient equipment is also something that needs to be considered because that's the low hanging fruit. Okay, but there are also other aspects where the use of carbon capture, the use of hydrogen, and low carbon fuels are inevitably, right? For example, in steel manufacturing, uh, I think at the moment, the typical way to produce steel is using coal as the reducing agent, but there is potential to actually replace coal with hydrogen, including green hydrogen. So this is something that the Australian government now and also many steel industry in Australia has been working on to develop hydrogen-based direct reduced iron, okay, to make steel. So with that being said, there's potential, I guess, to make an integrated clean energy trade corridors between Australia and Indonesia, right? So this is something that our group has been working on as well, collaborating with the Indonesian stakeholders. We have been talking with the ministry as well and a company, mining company in Indonesia, where we're looking at the potential for, you know, co-processing, I guess, between the Australia and Indonesia resources, right? Because as you know that, for example, for nickel, Indonesia has already extensive smelting capacity at the moment because the government has built a lot of projects. Uh, and Australia has a lot of minerals potential, as you can see from the mapping, especially can complement with the need for the lithium. Okay, but not just stop at that, right? Because at the moment, I think Indonesian nickel industry is still focused on intermediate product. Okay, but we haven't really go in depth into the advanced manufacturing, into the end products like the battery vehicles. So there's a potential for Australia to also support the advanced manufacturing here. And with this being said, I think there will be a lot of trading between Australia and Indonesia, where then transport will also need to be green as well. So there's potential to actually use hydrogen and low carbon fuels in order to power the shipping of materials between Australia and Indonesia, or even the broader Asia Pacific region. Okay. So what are the key pillars of Australia-Indonesia bilateral clean energy trade corridor? So Australia actually has already put a lot of concentration in Indonesia, right? To partner with Indonesia. So for example, we have kinetic partnership, which is the Australia-Indonesia Partnership for Climate, Renewable Energy and Infrastructure. And this is an important anchor, I guess, for policy alignment and then joint regulatory frameworks as well for those three key levers: hydrogen, low carbon fuels, and critical minerals. And then second pillar is the complementary assets. So Australia has renewable abundance and Indonesia has strong industrial demands. Combined, it will create a resilient and low emission supply chain. Okay. And finally, last but not least, and very importantly, technology and skill exchange, right? We need to use programs that the government has set, for example, the Connexi program, in order to realize joint research and development and human capital development, uh, so that we create future talents in Indonesia and Australia to service the growing clean and sustainable economy. So these are the key enablers, I guess, of the bilateral clean energy trade corridors between Australia and Indonesia. But at the same time, of course, there are always barriers, right? Especially if we look at the current condition, either the domestic condition in Indonesia, in Australia, and even the global landscape, I guess. First is that to realize the Australia-Indonesia trade corridors, then we gonna need large capital requirements, right? But with the current economic conditions, I guess investor confidence has become an issue, right? To you know uh, secure enough investment to meet the large capital requirements. Second is about policy and regulatory uncertainty, right? I think one of the key challenges is that Indonesia imposed a lot of very restrictive policy, which it can be discouraging investor, to be honest. Okay, for example, like the Indonesian local content requirements, as well as the recently announced government that the export needs to be from one door, right? So this policy evolvement, I guess, around the energy and also commodity has become a very significant barrier for bilateral trade corridors. And then third is about the standard differences and market structure differences between Australia and Indonesia, right? We have to admit that we have different approaches to carbon pricing, renewable certification, and our energy market is also different, has different framework. Where in Australia, there are many different company of electricity, let's say, right? There are many different electricity providers, but in Indonesia, it's centralized. So those kind of misalignment can be a challenge as well to realize the bilateral trade corridors. Nevertheless, there are a few key recommendations, including like we need to, use the kinetic as the backbone in order to align, okay, those policy, those regulations, in order to deepen the partnership in Australia and Indonesia. Second is that we need a very innovative finance mechanism as well. And it's very important for Australia and Indonesia to work together to create a healthy, I guess, environment or climate for investment. Okay. So the investor has trust in investing their money for the trade corridors. And then third recommendation is harmonizing standard certification and market framework. And most importantly, last point is about uh, human capital development through research and development, pilot project, and then skills program as well, in order to build future talents as well in the space of sustainable energy. With that, I hope I finish it on time or maybe a little bit early, which is good so that we can have more discussion. But with that, I wanted to end with a quote from Guru Harlem Brundtland, uh, who say sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to discuss and to answer any questions that you might have. I return it back to MC. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pak Denny, for the lecture and the presentations. I'm sure the audience took many important notes for your lectures. And now we welcome any question related to the lecture. Uh, Please feel free to submit them using the link provided in the QR code on your screen or through the link in the chat room. Okay, we have received some great question already. Now the first question, Pak Denny, what are the most important research gaps for PhD students seeking to integrate clean energy transition, water security, food resilience, and community resilience in Australia and Indonesia?
Yeah, thank you so much. Very good questions. I guess it might be like a PhD student that just started and then try to find research topic, but it's very good. Uh, I guess uh, one of the key gaps, I guess, is around the, as I mentioned, right? There are a lot of policy misalignment. So it depends on what sort of like fields that we're focusing on. But one of the gap that I think is significant is about the policy misalignment. So between Australia and Indonesia. Okay, so if we can develop, such a mechanism where we can align the policy so that it can support the bilateral or even multilateral supply chain, that would be something that is very important, I guess, to be studied and researched and investigated as an input for the government, right? Because if we talk about clean energy transition, right, and also about environmental issue like water security, flood resilience, and community resilience, it's a global and regional issue, not just one country issue, right? So we really need to have common understanding on that. Developing the framework is definitely important. That's one thing about policy. Second is in terms of technology. If I speak specifically about clean energy transition, um, the technology that we need to reach the net zero emission is not here yet, to be honest, right? We still don't have the solution, the exact solution, to reach the net zero emission. So I guess technology development research is still very important. Okay, either in solar panel, right, in battery, for example, in battery recycling as well. That's a hot topic. Okay, that I think is an important research gap that needs to be addressed as well. Not just about the technology itself, but about the recycling as well. When we talk about the end of the life, right? For example, I think in Australia, right, as you know, that Australia is one of the country with the highest penetration of rooftop solar. Okay, and right now I think the government and also many industry here in Australia has put a lot of focus on, you know, what we gonna do with the end of life solar panels, right? So that's why I think one of the key gaps in that aspect is developing processes or technologies to recycle the solar panel. So yeah, technologies is still important. And then second is the policy as well.
Okay, so the gap is the policy alignment and the technology development research still need to be improved. Yeah, Pak Denny. Okay, I hope it's answered the question. Next question. Australia has learned a lot about managing renewable energy grid stability. What are the top one or two lessons Indonesia's PLN can adopt right now as they add more solar and wind?
Yeah, this is very interesting questions. Um, and I've been discussing a lot this one in the conversation. So if you know, the conversation is one of media outlet talking about opinion for expert, right? I've been asked this question many, many times, right? Especially learning from Australia with the highest penetration of rooftop PV, but in Indonesia, why we cannot achieve such thing, right? So I guess it's about policy again, to be honest. Okay. Uh, it's if we look again at the policy, right? In Indonesia, I think it's a little bit restrictive, right? It doesn't really incentivize people where people wanted to install solar PV. That's one thing. And then second is about the excess electricity. Uh, I think it's important for the government to also think about the mechanism on which the excess electricity that rooftop solar generating can then be um, sent back to PLN, right? So that it can help to incentivize actually the end users. It will definitely encourage people to install solar PV, and that's one of the I guess the strategy that the Australian government used. Okay, so in New South Wales, let's say, right, in Sydney, the New South Wales government has put solar rebate. So that's essentially to support household to install solar PV, right? To help household to buy solar PV and install. That's one thing that can encourage people. And then second is also about the excess electricity that can be sent back as well to PLN. That will be very helpful. So I guess about the policy mechanism to support, I think that's one of the important lessons learned from Australia, I guess. Mm.
Right. So again, it's policy alignment. Okay. Next one. How's the economics feasibility to implement solar to hydrogen fuel model, especially for micro or mini or home usage? What are the challenges to implement this model?
Yeah, good question as well. Um, Again, it's currently not viable, right? And if you look at the key cost drivers, they're mainly the electricity and the electrolyzer cost. Okay. The electrolyzer, we're talking about the technology, right? So it really depends on the manufacturing company, how then they can actually improve the economics of the electrolyzer itself. So means that it needs further research and development. That's something that we probably cannot do, right? But the things that we can control to improve the feasibility is actually first is about using cheap electricity, and if possible is uh, free electricity if possible, right? So one of the things that we study here at UNSW as well is looking at curtail electricity. So using curtail electricity from renewable energy, including like for example from micro, mini, or home usage, right? So if we can channel the curtail the excess electricity, which is essentially free, then we can produce hydrogen economically potentially, right? But the next question would be what's then the end usage, right? And we especially with the small, if depending on the scale, right? So again, uh, when we talk about the distributed or decentralized system, we co-location of the hydrogen production with the end use is very important. Okay, so that's another consideration to improve the economic feasibility. For example, where we should build the hydrogen production facility. That's important. If we wanted to use the hydrogen for, say, I don't know, fuel cell vehicle refueling, let's say, right? So it might be better to actually put the hydrogen production close to the hydrogen refueling. Okay. Because then you will cut costs to transport the hydrogen from one point to another point because transporting hydrogen is also expensive. Okay. And then if you're planning to use the hydrogen for fertilizer, then place the hydrogen production close to the fertilizer production facility. So co-location is important, okay, other than looking at free electricity. Hope that answered the questions.
Okay, so the point is we need to further to research and development. The next question, are there opportunities for local governments to participate in pilot projects under the Australia-Indonesia Clean Energy Partnership, and how can they get involved? Pak Denny.
Yeah, let me read the question one more time. What the opportunities for local government to participate in pilot projects, right? And how? I guess this is very good question, right? And this is something that we wanted to encourage as well for the government to look into this, uh, collaboration or partnership in the clean energy. right? Especially to build pilot projects, because to realize the green trade corridors that I've been explaining, we need anchor project, right? So if any local government in Indonesia have the idea or potential project, that would be good. And there is pathway to that, right? I think one pathway is through program like Koneksi. Okay, so Koneksi is a program under the collaboration between many different agencies in Australia and Indonesia. I think it leads by DFAT, Australian government DFAT, together with BRIN in Indonesia, and many different institutions. But they essentially support to build uh, pilot projects, okay, especially that supports local communities. So it's very relevant, and they provide fundings depending on the scale of the project. Okay, and this is very important as well, to find partner, right? So it's very important for the local government or local industry. I will not limit the government in this case, but also like industry or even university in Indonesia that wanted to access, I guess, expert in Australia. It's important to link with us so that we can connect with the appropriate industry as well. So if I can share my experience maybe, so a few months ago, I think in February, I've been, chairing a Australia-Indonesia Sustainable Fuel Symposium, right, where essentially we bring a lot of Australian stakeholders from industry to come to in Indonesia, and then we're trying to link with the appropriate Indonesian companies, right, or Indonesian university. So wanted to give example, for example, like Lysella that I mentioned before, right? So we brought Lysella to Indonesia. So Lysella is a company working on hydrothermal liquefaction. So hydrothermal liquefaction is a process where we can, I guess, convert wet waste, okay, wet waste, which is quite abundant in Indonesia, wet waste. For example, like the palm oil fruit buns, for example, and convert it to liquid fuels, right? So they have been in contact, in fact, in Indonesia with one of a palm oil Indonesian company in order to convert their waste into SAF or sustainable aviation fuel. So this kind of collaboration, I guess, some things that we wanted to realize, right? To link uh, between the Australian and Indonesian government. So that one thing about Connexi, and then second is about networking as well with uh, Australian stakeholders. And then finally, I wanted to highlight also a program from the Australian Embassy as well, because I think in fact back in February I met with the representative from Australian Embassy, and they actually have a program under Kinetic as well, to support projects for local community. So I guess there are definitely opportunities, and I mean local government, local industry can get involved by accessing Connexi or even get in touch with the Australian embassy because they're pretty supportive in this kind of initiatives. Yeah, hope that answered the questions.
Okay, all right. So like there's three options, yeah, Pak Denny, like through
Yeah,
Koneksi, through Kinetic, or link with you.
yeah.
Okay,
Not just me, but I guess diaspora as well in Indonesian diaspora in Australia, there are a lot, right? Because and they're quite active in promoting this kind of things, the relationship between Australia and Indonesia.
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pak Denny. Okay, next questions. As Indonesia's climate is incredibly hot and humid, what practical modifications or maintenance are needed to keep sustaining the renewable energy from degrading in the tropics?
Yeah. Good questions. This is probably more related to, for example, I'll give example on solar panel maybe, right? Because solar panel is quite sensitive to heat, okay, to heat. Um, but I think in Australia it's actually quite hot as well and dry. Okay. But the current technology of solar panel, I guess they're quite okay. They're quite resistant with high temperature. Uh, Another alternative, I think, that might be promising in Indonesia, I would say, floating solar. I'm not sure whether participants have heard about this, but in Indonesia we look a lot on floating solar, and we have the facility Cirata floating solar as well, right? That will help because first about the thermal management, right? So because the question asked about it's hot and humid, and then the thermal management. In fact, I think if we put the floating solar on water bodies, it will actually help to improve the performance of the solar panel, okay, by a few percentage, I guess, improving the performance of the solar panel and also the lifetime, okay. But other than that, I think floating solar is a good solution for Indonesia because unlike Australia, right? Australia has a lot of land, and because it's a very big country, we have a lot of lands available to build large scale of solar PV. But in Indonesia, it is somewhat limited. Okay, but we have a lot of water bodies, right? And there is already a study by my colleague, Indonesian colleague as well, that did the PhD in ANU. He actually mapped, right, the water surface that are suitable for floating solar, and we have a lot in Indonesia. So other than the thermal management, the floating solar will actually give you know potential large scale, I guess, in Indonesia. Yeah, hope the answer. Good.
Yeah, how it's answered the questions. We move to the next question. What is the best approach to make local engineers are fully trained to run the system and maintain in long term? Maybe this is for local.
Yeah, local engineer field. Yeah. Okay. Good. Good questions. I guess this is about knowledge exchange as well, right? And skills development. Uh, Something again, the Connexi program can help. So that's why I think um the knowledge exchange or skill exchange where the Australia can help, that would be something that is good. Uh, Developing workshop is one of it, I think. So I think it's good that the Australian awards they're doing a case lecture like this, right? Because that's part of the knowledge exchange as well. But moving, I guess we also need initiative from Australia as well, or even from the Indonesian side to develop workshop, I guess, for not just knowledge, but I guess about skills. Because this is, again, if local engineers in Indonesia wanted to learn, I guess some things that can, learn from Australia experience as well, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so not about knowledge, but also sharing the skills.
Yeah, skills development, I guess that's something that might be useful. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Pak Denny. Next questions. What Solar 2X model best implemented in Indonesia, considering Indonesia's infrastructure readiness and consumers' habit? What are the challenges to implement these models?
Yep. Best in considering the good. Okay. Very interesting question as well, this one. Um, Again, for Solar 2X model, right? I'm not sure what specifically models that this question asks, but I guess it might be like how it can be implemented, right? How the Solar 2X or renewable energy technologies can be implemented, especially around the hydrogen. I think because Indonesia is an archipelagic country, right? So implementing Solar 2X or any solar hydrogen technology needs to be different from fossil fuels technology because with fossil fuels, let's say coal, right? Coal gasification to produce electricity or hydrogen, it's very centralized. Okay, they usually build huge coal plants somewhere and then distributing the electricity or the hydrogen to wherever it's can use. But if you use renewable energy like solar energy, they're quite dispersed, right, and distributed. So I guess the best model to implement solar to X or green hydrogen technology needs to be decentralized. Okay, so we need to shift from centralized system to decentralized systems. Means that we focus on smaller scale, somewhere in Bali, somewhere in Lombok, right? Where they harness whatever renewable energy resources that are available there. That will be the best model. Okay, nothing about the dispersion of the renewable energy, but that will also help in terms of the cost actually, so that you don't need to transport, hydrogen or electricity. It can be very localized and benefit the local community. Yeah.
So need to be decentralized. Next question. Are any probability for early researchers and research center in Indonesia that focus on materials chemistry or nanomaterials to take part in project of decarbonization such as mentioned?
Yeah, good question as well. This is very possible, of course, right? And there have been a lot of programs that, looking into this. Uh, Again, connections with Indonesian diaspora or any academics in Australia, that would be useful, right? Because I guess, like, if we talk about the education system here, say at UNSW, right, we are very supportive to student exchange, research practicum students as well. So there's definitely probability not for early career researchers or students to actually uh, conduct research, right, in Australian university, because we're quite supportive to that, and there are a lot of programs on that. I think within the Australia Awards as well, there are also programs like, short terms, or like knowledge about, I think, lecture or something. Because I have friends that join that program as well. So that's one thing. Uh, but apart from that, I think university in Australia in general, I think, is very supportive on recruiting, I guess, international students to take exchange here in Australia, to do research in chemistry, nanomaterials, or energy projects. So yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, university exchange program and also Australia Award short course. We have like several short
Yeah.
course, for example, for this kind of topics. So yeah, maybe people like audience, if you want to know about it, let's check our website to more updates. So yeah, next questions. Is there any green chemistry principle and techno-economic analysis for conducting that pilot project as mentioned, since the most challenge as researcher is maintain the feasibility and eco-friendly?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Principle, I guess, right? For conducting pilot project, blah blah, and green chemistry principle. Maintain physics. Yeah. I guess. Yeah. This is a very good question too. Um. I think research in university, okay, and any research center, I guess, needs to be industrially relevant right now. Okay. That's something that we always encourage here at UNSW, and I'm pretty sure at the University of Australia. So, uh, I think we used to think about research, for those that are interested in research, by the way, um, from identifying knowledge gap in the literature, reading a lot of journal papers, blah blah blah. I think they're still important now, but I think with the current conditions, we are encouraging students to think on the broader context as well, right? So, I guess, in um, identifying what sort of like research area that you're gonna working on, right? Needs to think about what's the industry needs then, or what's the government needs, for example. Okay, for example, like, okay, the industry needs technology that can produce ammonia sustainably, then it's something that you can work on. And what's the gap, right? So it's shifting, to be honest, the research landscape here in Australia as well. Used to be focusing on fundamental research, but now it's moving to more applied as well, right? With many grants actually request industry support. Okay, so yeah, I guess the principle again is we need to look at the broader context, okay, in conducting any pilot project or research projects, right? In order to make sure that whatever we're doing or whatever we're developing, pilot project or research project, are actually industrially relevant, and there is a strong need for that.
Okay, I hope it's answered the question, yeah, Pak Denny. We can move to the next question.
Sure.
With SAF partnership, how would carbon emission and fuel needs for supply chains to transport the SFA be calculated between countries?
Yeah. Okay, this is a good question, right? Because if we talk especially about international aviation, right? And because to be honest, I think it's still big problem, okay, about the carbon accounting for sustainable aviation fuel. So who responsible to count the emission, right? So for example, if there is flight from Australia and Indonesia, right, then who will be bear the responsibility for the carbon emission? So I guess this is something that is a big gap as well, still in the carbon accounting mechanism, especially if we talk about using sustainable aviation fuel, right? We really need to carefully evaluate the benefit of using the sustainable aviation fuel. So as I highlighted in my presentation, this is actually one of the gap that needs to be addressed about the misalignment or the lack, actually not misalignment in this case, but the lack of regulation in carbon accounting. Okay, so this is something that is still kept, to be honest.
Okay, yeah. Next question. Can a fresh civil engineering graduate pursue a career in the energy sector? If so, are there any specific certification that would be beneficial or required? Maybe, but Denny.
Yeah, of course, of course. I'm sure that civil engineering also play a role in energy transition. And in fact, I think when we talk about any field, essentially, right, including energy transition, it's multidisciplinary. Okay, so not just chemical engineer, not just electrical engineer, but we also need civil engineer as well, right? And other aspect of engineering essentially and science as well. Okay. But I guess the second question, right? Are there any specific certification that would be beneficial or required? Uh, I guess upskill. My suggestion would be like upskill as much as possible by joining any certification like Indonesian engineer certification or whatever it is, and join workshop, join skill development workshop as well. I guess uh, that may be relevant to renewable energy. And UNSW, a little bit of promotion, I guess. In UNSW, I think we supporting of the free, I guess, education as well. We in fact actually have um free online course related to critical minerals, related to hydrogen, uh, and clean energy transition in general. So look into the opportunity to join those kind of courses as well, because many different university will also provide those free courses as well, free online courses. Mm.
Okay, so it can be shifting from civil engineering to yeah, energy sector. All right, next questions, please. Assuming regulatory, financing, and technology exchange it's successful, what prevents global firms from continuing to use existing China-centered supply chains if they remain cheaper and more mature?
Yeah, very good question as well, right? Uh, I guess the question is, what prevents global firms from continuing to use existing China-centered supply chains if they remain cheaper and major? Again, the reason why we wanted to not move away from China, but we wanted to diversify, right? So that we don't risk the clean technology manufacturing. That's the reason why we wanted to diversify, so that we have secured uh, supply chain. So it's about geopolitical condition, to be honest, right? That might prevent this one. Okay, we know that the geopolitical condition is right now is volatile. Okay, so that's why we need to diversify the supply chains other than China. Mm.
Yeah. All right. Let's see if we still have another questions.
I think we still have another 3.
Yeah. Oh, Winda, if there's any questions, or here, participants in the Zoom, if you have like another question, you can also drop into the chat box if you didn't have time to put it into the Mentimeter. Linda, is there any questions? Oh, I think there's no questions.
I'm happy to answer any question through email if anyone has, follow-up question or something. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Your email is already in the presentation, right,
Yeah.
Denny? So we will share the presentation to the all participants that attended here. So if you have like any question or further questions about the lecture, you can also email to the Pak Denny right away.
Yeah.
And I think we can move to the next session, Pak Denny, if we did
Sure.
have any questions. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pak Denny, for your for the answers for all questions. Now we like to conduct quizzes and award merchandise to 3 winners. Please join us in the Mentimeter through the QR code on your screen. My colleague will share the barcode for participants to join the Mentimeter. Yeah. Now you can scan the barcode, or you can go to the mentimeter.com or menti.com and enter the code 19261896. Or you can practically click in the chat room. And yeah, before we start, please write your email address and real name in the Mentimeter, so it will help us to identify and contact the winner. Yeah, so don't forget to write your full name, like a real name, in the Mentimeter before we start, so we can ensure the participant to join the quiz. Okay, is everyone already? Maybe I think 19 already in the Mentimeter. Okay, we will start for the first question. There, anyone is 18. 18 players already. Everyone? Let's start with the first question. Decarbonizing is not the only key driver for achieving climate goals and net zero emission. True or false? Okay. Everyone, are you like, which one is like the right answer? Is it true? Decarbonizing is not the only key driver, or it's false? Let's see the answer. Well, it's true. It's not the only key driver. Question number 2. Building blocks of clean energy partnership includes the following: A, energy resources; B, critical minerals; C, technologies; or D, all of above. Maybe all of above, or one of the question, or one of the answers. So yeah, I share the answer actually. The third question: which of the following is not levers and challenge of aviation's dependency? Increasing consumption, electric and hydrogen powered aircraft, high quality offset, renewable aviation fuel, SAF. So which of the following is not? So increasing fuel consumption is not levers and challenge. So, now we have like 20 players. Dr. Denny Gunawan's academic focus on development of sustainable energy and global decarbonization goals. True or false? Let's see if the audience right answer. Only one. So this is the last answer. The last questions. What is the popular student hub at University of New South Wales called? The main, well, it's very difficult to say. Or, is it Great Hall, the Run House, the Science Center, or the Sport Pavilion? What is the name? It's called the Run House. I think it's because the look is rounded. Okay, so we have identified today's three winners. The first one, Dimas, the second one, Pingu, and the third one, Magical Rhino. For the three winners, please contact us, including the Pingu and Magical Rhino. We don't know your full name, like a real name, so please contact us like through the email or through the WhatsApp with the proof of your win from the Mentimeter. Our team sometimes has difficulties identifying your real name and your contact if you do not write your email address the first slide on the Mentimeter. So that's why I remind you at the beginning. Again, we remind the three winners to contact us through email or WhatsApp number in the chat room. Once again, congratulations. So now I would like to invite everyone to a group photo. We would be grateful if you could please turn on your camera. Our team, Mas Robert, will have to capture the group photos. Mas Robert, are you there?
Yes. Check. Two screen to capture. Take times. Okay, everyone's ready. One on the count of three. 1, 2, 3. You smile. Okay. The last one. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Sarah.
All right. Mas Robert, your voice is so low. Is it already done?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Everything is
Oh.
done. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, thank you so much, Mas Robert. Oh, I think we have like the second winner, like sorry, Isfahani is a Pingu. So, Miss Isfa, please contact us, yeah, through email or WhatsApp. Now, finally, we have reached at the end of our guest lecture session today. Once again, I would like to extend my gratitude to Dr. Denny Gunawan atau Pak Denny for the insightful and valuable presentations, and also the University of New South Wales for your participation in making this guest lecture a success. To all participants, I hope you found this afternoon session informative and insightful. We have a lot of learn from the experience shared today about the topic. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in the next guest lecture program. And stay happy and healthy. Sorry, stay safe and healthy, everyone. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Denny.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Pak Denny. Thank you so much.
The world faces monumental challenges. It always has. But if you look around, progress is everywhere. People are coming together, imagining a better future, working to turn ideas into positive impact. Sometimes they stumble, other times they fail. But through each misstep, mishap, and mistake, there's progress, not only for the chosen few, but for everyone. Progress is making clean energy accessible. Progress makes landfill useful. Progress empowers Indigenous success. advances healthcare, protects the vulnerable, improves quality of life for dementia patients. Progress expands access to education. We've made incredible progress, but there is more to be achieved. Our sights remain forward. Progress for all.